So not to waste any of our time, I would like to invite Dato' Ambiga to kick off the debate. Please welcome Dato'.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much to Malay Mail for having us here. Ladies and gentlemen, I'll get straight to it. In a Mandarin talk show recently, the Prime Minister vowed to hold clean and fair elections. He said, "I'd like to repeat it once more, that we will not want to be elected on the basis that we have rigged the elections or manipulated the election. We want the people to show their support in a fair and clean manner." Ladies and gentlemen, Bersih too wants what the Prime Minister says he wants. But in our view, neither the Prime Minister nor Bersih too is going to get their wish in the 13th general elections. I'll tell you why. I can't touch on all the 8 demands because of a lack of time, but let me tell you about our electoral roll. That's the first demand that was referred to. Dr. Ong Kian Ming, a respected academic, has recently been involved. I think the project was mentioned, the Merak project, which is a study into the Malaysian electoral roll. Now, his research took 3 part-time researchers 3 months to compile. What he uncovered is just the tip of the iceberg. He wrote an article, or 2 articles in Malaysia Kini, uncovering 10 things wrong with the electoral roll. Let me just highlight 2 or 3. 1, voters above 85 years old. Now, an analysis of the third quarter of the 2011, third quarter is last year's third quarter of 2011 electoral rolls, revealed 65,543 voters who were aged 85 and older. In addition, more than 1,000 voters listed at 100 years old and above. 19 voters were born before 1900. As Kian Ming said yesterday, we have clearly an excellent healthcare system. But the area of concern here is that the ICs of dead voters can be used by others to cast a vote on their behalf. Secondly, he found inconsistencies in the gender indicated by the IC number and EC data. This is something that was also raised in the minority report of the PSE. Now, an analysis of the third quarter 2011 electoral roll found 15,855 voters whose IC numbers indicate a different gender from that listed by EC. Among these, there were 72 bin, son of, who are listed as female, and 76 binti who are listed as male. Now, what does this show? A possibility that a person of a different gender could have used these ICs to register themselves as voters. That's the danger. Thirdly, voters who have IC addresses with the state of birth as 7X. These indicate that they're born overseas. Now, as you know, there's much speculation that non-Malaysians have been given citizenship and hence voting rights in order to have them vote for the ruling government. Now, this study showed 167,000 ICs with the state of origin digits as 7X. In the third quarter 2011 electoral roll. You also have instances of spouses of the army or police voters who are of the same gender. Alright? So you have spouses of army police who are of the same gender, same-sex marriages, appears to be same-sex marriages, were identified. Now, the cases highlighted, I've just pointed out 4. The cases highlighted under the 10 categories that he looked at, and please go and read his paper, they do not include, they're not exhaustive, they cover 100,000 cases, okay? Those 100,000 do not include the 42,000 that the EC chief is talking about, and these 42,000 voters, as you know, whose details were unclear or could not be found in the NRD database. Now, recently, Dr. Ong did another piece of research, and it showed this. 3.1 million voters whose IC addresses shows a different voting constituency from the constituency in which the voter is actually voting in, i.e. the IC shows one address but they are voting in a different constituency. Don't confuse this with people whose IC shows a different address from where they live, because people move. So that's possible. This is different. This is someone's IC address saying they should be in A constituency, but they have been voting in B constituency. Now, there is also 65,455 foreigners who are on the electoral roll. He also found 106,743 cases of deletions, 6,762 cases of additions without public display to the electoral roll from the fourth quarter 2010 to third quarter 2011. Now, the presence of the 3.1 million voters whose IC addresses do not correspond to their voting constituencies is very troubling, because let me tell you, this information was given to the SPR by JPN in the year 2002, and the EC has done nothing about it. You see, prior to 2002, people used to register to vote just by using electric bill, etc. They didn't use their IC. Then subsequent to that, they introduced the system where you had to show your IC. So JPN actually gave these figures to the EC. They have failed to act. Now the problem with that is it's a contravention of Article 1191B of the Federal Constitution, which says a voter must be resident in the constituency in which he is voting. Right. I'm going to move on because I don't have much time. But let me tell you, there were also 65,000 foreigners that were found in the electoral roll, and also people who have been removed or added without the roll being displayed. The failure of SPR to take any action in this really leaves a lot of doubt as to whether they are actually doing this cleaning they say they're doing every day. So the preliminary findings of MERAP shows that we have something to worry about in the electoral roll. Now let me, what I'm concerned about is that what EC seems to be pushing and giving the impression is that there are only 42,000 doubtful voters. What I've told you just now is more than 3 million. And don't forget, when they downplayed 42,000, they kept saying it's a small number. You remember that? They said it's 3% is nothing. Now that's a highly irresponsible statement to make, because given the way elections run in this country, the margins between winning and losing have been very, very small. So, and in fact, Dr. Wang Chunhuat recently did a study, and he said you could knock over the state government of Selangor with 42,000 votes. So it is not a small matter. Now, our quarrel with the PSC on this is that they didn't even scratch the surface when they looked at what was wrong with the electoral roll. This man with experts took 3 months to uncover this. Now, postal voters is another issue. The issue with postal voters, oh yes, one more thing about the EC in relation to these other issues. They never raised them with the PSC. I would have thought that the EC had a duty of full disclosure to the PSC as to what was wrong with the electoral roll. But it appears that they only answered questions if someone found some errors. So the public were bringing forward cases and then the EC would answer. So to me, that's not good enough. That's not proactive enough. Now, postal voters, another big issue. The issue with postal voters is this. It is vulnerable to election rigging. Postal voters are either sent postal ballots or they take them home. Now they have been sent by the military chain of command and allowing them to be intercepted and fraudulently misused. Let me tell you, these votes, armed forces, postal voters, for example, have had to mark their ballot papers in front of their military superiors, for example, and they are in fear that they have to vote for the ruling party. There have been cases or reports of ballots being sold. That's the problem with postal voters. They're given away or sold. Some army personnel revealed last year that they had been instructed to vote for thousands of their colleagues. There's a YouTube, it's on YouTube by the way, I don't know whether you all recall that. In the Cebu by-election, it was by postal votes. The postal votes is what made the difference. Most shockingly, 39 postal ballots more were returned than those issued. Lembah Pantai, Nurul's constituency. In a short period of time now, military and police voters have increased from 169 to 2,101. Her winning margin was 2,805. a few more, and she can be knocked over by postal votes. Now, we are concerned that the PSC did not study this issue of security. We raised it. And let me tell you, everybody knows that postal votes is a problem. So our quarrel with the PSC report on the issue of postal votes is that they didn't study the issue of security. I know they have suggested advanced voting. We've agreed with that. But to date, we haven't seen any regulation before Parliament laid by the EC in relation to this. Now, last point before I stop. Overseas voters, more than 1 million are disenfranchised. The PSC accepted the problem was logistics. Now, how can we deprive people of their right to vote because of logistics? On the 25th of August 2011, the chairman of the EC announced that overseas voters could vote. He backtracked very soon after that. Yes. So I will stop there. I think as far as overseas voters are concerned, we have more than 1 million who are presently disenfranchised. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much, Dato'. Khairy, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Salam sejahtera, salam sejahtera Malaysia. Thank you very much, Mr. Moderator, Dato' Ambiga. As all of you know, I've come here today because Dato' Ambiga and I share concern for electoral reforms. And we are also bound by something much more special than that, and that was we were tear-gassed by the same police force on the same day last year. And that creates a bond of friendship that cannot be broken. But ladies and gentlemen, I've come here today as well to tell you that I take a different perspective from Dato' Ambiga. What I'm trying to tell you here tonight is that her decision to go ahead with Bersih 3.0 on Saturday is something that is preempting the reforms that is taking place, something that is prejudicial in terms of the reforms that's taking place, and misrepresenting the reasons why you are going to go out on Saturday for Bersih 3.0. Before I start, I just want to reiterate what she said. For me, just like the Prime Minister, I hold to one principle, just like all my colleagues in Barisan Nasional. We hold to the principle that the next general elections must be the freest and the fairest in the country's history. We hold to the principle that the winner of the next general election must win with honor and the loser must lose with dignity. That means a fair, a level playing field, a fair election. Please. I know you support me, but please don't waste my time. Jangan buang masa saya. Ladies and gentlemen, I would put it to you, unlike Dato' Ambiga, that out of 8 of the demands, original demands of Bersih 2.0, 7 of them have been met or are being addressed following from the PSC recommendations. Electoral roll is being cleaned up, reform of postal voting is taking place, the use of indelible ink has been agreed upon. The only thing is minimum campaign period, we put 10 days and not 21 days. Free and fair access to the media. I can tell you tonight, Dato' Ambiga, as a Barisan Nasional Member of Parliament and as Ketua Pemuda, the Chief of UMNO Youth and Barisan Nasional Youth, I support all parties have the same amount of time on all national media, RTM, TV3, mainstream media, to tell the Rakyat their policy platform and also their manifesto. Let's be fair about that. 6, strengthening public institutions, many reform initiatives within the PSC recommendation. 7, stopping corruption. We're supposed to sit down with the opposition within 3 months to discuss a code of conduct for governments, what they can and cannot do after Parliament is dissolved and after the state assemblies are dissolved, and to stop dirty politics. That's something that we can all agree upon. So 7 out of 8. And many of the recommendations by the PSC, the Parliamentary Select Committee, are time-bound. 45 days to clear up the 70 to 80,000 names, of which there are more than 50 voters in a single address. 3 months to discuss a code of conduct. 3 months to look into a system for overseas voting. So I put it to Dato' Ambiga, why? Why are you preempting these reforms and taking it out on the street yet again? Don't get me wrong, I respect your right to go out on the street. That is a freedom that I will defend for you. But I do not agree with your cause. I do not agree with your cause because you are preempting it, you are prejudging it, and more importantly, you are misrepresenting the people why they are going to go out. Now, she gave some facts and figures, and I hope I don't have time initially to dispute them, but I'm going to dispute 1 or 2 and tell you that there has been a misrepresentation of facts and figures. Now this is a flyer that Bersih Steering Committee 3.0 has published, has distributed around the world. And the flyer says, Malaysian electoral fraud by numbers. If you look at the press statements that Dato' Ambiga has come up with, the steering committee, it's fraud. Fraud being perpetuated by the government. Fraud being perpetuated by the election commission. That is prejudicial. Fraud. To put into the perspectives of people that this election is already not clean and it's not fair. This is my problem. My problem is not with your perjuangan, your struggle to make sure that there's clean elections. My problem is misrepresentation. Now let's just take a few examples. 42,000. She mentioned this great big 42,000 figure that the election commission themselves has come forward to say these are dodgy voters. I see 42,051 to be exact. 42,000 here. Fraud. Fraud, yeah? It says fraud. 42,051 cases. Let me explain a little bit the history of these 42,051 cases of voters who are considered dodgy or dubious. Last year in September, at the Election Commission's own initiative, own resourcefulness, they asked Jabatan Pendaftaran Negara, or NRD, National Registration Department, go through the entire electoral list, 12.5 million people. Check those names for which you have some suspicion that they are inactive in your files, in the NRD files. So the NRD went back, they checked the 12.5 million people, they came back and said, actually we've got 42,051 voters, which we don't really know, we don't really have updated records for them. So these 42,051 voters were considered dodgy voters. Bersih will have you believe that they are fraudulent voters. If they were fraudulent voters, ladies and gentlemen, Dato' Ambiga, the EC would not have displayed them for 3 months. The EC displayed every single one of these 42,051 voters for 3 months, for everyone to see whether or not these voters are still alive. I remember in Parliament, Dato' Sri Anwar, the leader of the opposition, stood up when we were debating the Election Offences Amendment, and he said, these 42,000 voters are not even citizens of Malaysia. That is the spin that they'll have you believe. They're not even citizens of Malaysia. So I checked. As an MP, I did some research. I did my own research. I want to find out what is the situation, the actual status of these 42,051 voters. Ladies and gentlemen, let me tell you this. 42,051 voters listed by the NRD and the Election Commission as voters who have suspect history and status in the NRD list. Now, Dato' Ambiga said it's fraudulent voters. She said the EC must use its power under section 25(2)(g) of the Election Regulations 2002. The Chief Registrar must strike these people out because they're fraudulent voters. This is the reason why you're going out on Saturday. Ladies and gentlemen, 3 months displayed. If within that 3 months, not a single soul from 42,051 voters came forward to say, hey, I'm still alive, I go with her. I say that to Ambiga, you're right. Let's strike out these voters. These voters are fraudulent. If within 3 months, 42,051 voters, tak ada seorang pun keluar dan cakap saya masih lagi hidup ataupun bapak saya dah meninggal, then I will believe that those are fraudulent voters. But this is listed as fraudulent voters. Ladies and gentlemen, in that 3 months, 1,248 cases came forward. 55% of which are still alive. They came forward and they said, hang on a second, I'm still here. Hitam binti Taib came forward, 98 years old. Teo Siam Ngoh came forward, 97 years old. Chu Siu Beng came forward, 97 years old. More than 700 people came forward to say, I'm still alive. Their only mistake, their only crime is that they didn't update their IC. You see the JPN, the NRD, if you do not update your IC, if you do not change your IC from the old blue one with the cap jari, Persekutuan Tanah-Tanah Melayu, or even if you didn't change it from the one after that, the 12-digit, the one that's laminated, you are considered inactive in their files. These people, their only crime was they didn't update their IC. Yet Dato' Ambiga says they are fraudulent voters and we must strike them out of the electoral roll. Ladies and gentlemen, if the EC struck them out of the electoral roll, the Election Commission would have done something illegal and they would have done something against the Constitution of Malaysia, which is to deny these people their constitutional right to vote. And out of the 45%, ladies and gentlemen, those were the people who are legitimate voters. There were also 45% of the 1,248 that came forward that they say they passed away. And this also answers the allegation that there are people 100 years old who are still on the electoral list. For example, Mingkilan B. Panabengan passed away in 1993, 18 years ago, born in 1990. But the next of kin did not report it to NRD, and as a result, the name is still there. Ladies and gentlemen, you have to remember, to strike out a name, whether or not the name is 150 years old, you must report that death to NRD. Another example, Kasum binti Talib didn't report for 8 years. Only last year, at the end of last year, the exercise come forward saying, my mother has passed away, can you take her off the list? So ladies and gentlemen, I come back to the point. Dr. Ambiga said, they are fraudulent voters. Fraud, that's why you must go out. But these 1,248 cases, I admit, they're not all 40,000, have come to prove that these people are still either alive or they existed as voters. And if you go with her argument that they are fraudulent voters, that you must strike it out and we must march, then you are actually putting your struggle on very, very shaky foundations. These are facts. These are facts. And ladies and gentlemen, there are many, many other cases which I will dispel throughout the night to show you that in fact there are perfectly legitimate reasons for all these anomalies which Dr. Kianming, which Brese have come up with. But the only problem I have is, and I asked Dr. Ambiga once again, Dr. Ambiga, out of the 40,803 left, in this particular example, now that I've told you that 1,248 cases came forward, can you tell me with absolute certainty that these 40,803 are fraudulent cases? Or is it possible? No. Is it probable? Because 1,248 came forward, that they are still legitimate voters, or that they were legitimate voters that passed away. They may be in the Pendalaman, in the interior. Their only crime was not to change their IC. So ladies and gentlemen, just one concrete example why the fundamental basis for which you, Dr. Ambiga, are telling people to go out on Saturday is not only untrue, but it's a misrepresentation of the facts if you look for it properly. Thank you very much.